and she's interested in old pictures and artifacts in regard to people that are older than us. She's 44, I'm 58, and she would like to hear a little bit about your history.
Well, Lord, I don't know.
Didn't you say that you was born here in the state of Tennessee, that you were a true blue Tennessean?
Oh, yeah.
And didn't you say that you was born originally down in the county of
Moore County.
Moore County, which is almost your southern county, correct? There's not but one other county further than Moore County, and then you get into, what, Alabama?
Alabama's right below us, It's probably about 40 miles or something to the Alabama line.
To the Alabama line. Now, whenever you was a little girl growing up, do you remember y'all having a vehicle?
Oh, yeah, we had a car, and then when my daddy died and I was 13, we had a pickup truck.
You remember what kind of vehicles that there was?
No, because Mama traded the truck off pretty close after he died.
And you was 13 whenever he passed away?
Uh-huh.
And y'all raised up right down there beside Lynchburg, in the town of Lynchburg, correct?
Yes.
Right there beside Jack Daniel's distillery?
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever know any of Jack Daniel's kinfolks?
Well, as a child, I've met some of them. Before as really knowing them, I didn't.
I see. That's I guess still to this day, one of the predominant merchant resources in that county, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's really...
Almost the only. Other than maybe over there in, what is that, Shelbyville? The town of Shelbyville, where they sell Tennessee quarter horses? Now that's in the same county, right?
Shelbyville, no, it's in... I don't know what this is.
It's probably in the same county that Bell Buckle's in, isn't it?
Probably, yeah. Yeah.
That's probably 35, 40 miles from Lynchburg, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
But you're very, very familiar with Bell Buckle, aren't you?
Well, yes, my aunt lived just about a mile or two from the middle of Bellevue, and I always went and stayed a week with her in the summer, and we'd go to Bell Buckle.
Right. How did they get a little college established over there? Do you know?
I don't know. They have I think they have an elementary and high school. And
yeah. Now, your mother, was she a true blue Tennessean?
Yeah,
About what year was she born in?
In 1913.
1913. And she had how many children?
Just me.
Just you? Mm-hmm. You was the only one? Really? I didn't know that. And she lived to be how old?
She liked one day being 88.
And she died in what year?
2001.
2001. You'd done already moved to Nashville by that time.
Well, she had two. She lived here then.
Oh, she lived here too? Mm-hmm. And you worked for an outfit for how many years? Like 40 years here in Nashville?
Well, the last job I had, I worked 37 years.
37 years for the same outfit. What was you doing?
Well, I started out as secretary, and then I guess moved up. I was assistant purchasing agent.
What does that consist of?
Well, we was on they had about four places out of Nashville, but we did all the ordering for the whole company in Nashville.
Is that place still going today?
It is, but it's been sold out.
It's went to a different
Owners, I think.
different ownership. God, you can remember whenever moving to Nashville at the age of 18, which would have been what year?
I moved to Nashville in 1954. I was 17 when I graduated from high school.
And you moved to Nashville. Up and down Charlotte, in comparison to then versus now, all the people and all the traffic, there is no comparison, is it?
No, see, we had no interstates. Just Church Street and Charlotte and Broadway, that was your main drags through Nashville.
You've really seen Nashville really grow then, haven't you?
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't have Broadway? They didn't have all those other main streets back then?
Oh yeah, they had Broadway.
Oh, they had Broadway?
Broadway, West End. And
Do you remember the first time you went to the Grand Ole Opry?
oh yeah, but it was several years later.
To this day, do you still keep up with some of the country and western stars?
Oh, just knowing who they are when they're on TV or something.
I see. I got to thinking, Miss Bobbie Sue, on the way here. It was the year 2005 whenever you and I first become acquainted. And of course I was living down by, is it Bellevue?
Bellevue section.
In the Bellevue section down here?
Mm-hmm.
You remember what road it was that I was on?
Breslin, Bresslyn, I believe.
Breslin Road. And y'all was raising money for a church or something, wasn't you?
Yeah, they had bought this big house and it was on about 3.5 acres, and they planned to
Renovated over to a church.
build it set back enough they could build a church in front of it, and it was already zoned, for a church. But then when the flood came, it really fouled the property up, and
What flood are you talking about?
well,
The flood in 2008, whenever it flooded the Grand Ole Opry?
yeah,
That flood? Was it 2008 that happened?
something like, I believe.
Because me and you become acquainted in 2005, and then I wound up leaving in January from your house on a snowy, rainy afternoon, heading down to lower part of Mississippi to work the Katrina damage down there. That I stayed down there, give or take, I guess about 6 months, maybe 8 months in 2006. And I had a hectic year that year because I actually come back from the lower part of Mississippi towards working the Katrina damage. And I wound up taking a big rendezvous up towards Maryland, up towards Washington, D.C. And it was probably one of the most pleasant experiences that I had towards walking down the C&O Canal. Do you remember me telling you about me going down the C&O Canal pulling a wagon?
Oh, yeah.
I pulled that wagon for about 67 miles. Matter of fact, I wore out 3 different wagons. I got caught up in Papaw's Tunnel, and then I think it was White's Ferry is whenever Secret Service come into my life and checkpointed me and make sure that I didn't have no bad intentions towards going up into, what part of that is that up there towards Maryland? It's a town that's associated with Maryland, right there at Washington D.C., right there off the river there.
I don't know much about that country up through there.
Oh, you don't? Something town. I don't forgot the name of it now. But I wound up staying there on the C&O Canal for, I guess, right at 2.5 months before I wound up coming back to Memphis, Tennessee, and then rehooked back up towards getting my tools. I kept my toolbox in Tennessee, and I headed back to lower part of Mississippi, in which that didn't work out, and I wound up spending that winter in Florida, down at St. Augustine, Florida. Remember me working at the dealership there in Florida?
Mm-hmm.
Living on the Anastasia Island. We had a good, strong relationship. Sending cards to each other, talking to each other. That winter, before I wound up leaving to go to the Katrina damage, didn't you meet my son?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Didn't he swing by here?
Oh yeah. He think it was their anniversary or something. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
they ate dinner with us one night.
Right.
And his wife.
Him and his wife. I didn't know if you remembered that or not.
Oh yeah.
But I counted up the years whenever I was coming up here from 2005 to now. We've known each other now for 15 years.
Yeah.
That's pretty good lengthy time. I know that there's been times that you wondered about me because of so much anxiety or so much police presence in my life. There was lots of times that you wondered whether or not I was a legitimate person, or whether or not I was doing stuff that I shouldn't have been doing, or whether or not people was just agitating and aggravating my life. But you know, I spent a whole lot of time up there in the land between the lakes. A whole lot of time. And you can bear witness to this. But do you remember telling me the first time that I wound up almost getting in serious trouble up there in LBL, land between the lakes? You told me, Dennis, you need to stay out of there. There's no telling what them people are liable to cook up about you. I think you knew that I was being framed by a group of people for whatever reason. You knew that they was attacking me and they was trying to frame me. And the whole time, Miss Bobbie Sue, I was up there praying for a revival, seeking divine leadership from the Lord in regard to seeing His will done. And of course, whenever you have basically the TVI come into your home, or the FBI, I don't know which it was. It was some high-ranking to do with law enforcement that come in here and question you about our relationship, and then they messed around with your phone. That's whenever you got leery about, gee, should I even have a relationship with this guy towards even being his friend? And of course, whenever I went out west, I stayed in constant contact with you, especially out in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And I think you knew, Miss Bobbie Sue, that they was bird dogging me. They was watching every itty bitty move that I was making, and there had to be a reason why that they was doing this. Did you ever figure out in your heart and in your mind what was going on?
Not really.
It's kind of difficult to sum up in just a few words, but the fact of the matter is I was involved in something during Ronald Reagan's administration that was really, really big, pertaining to 9 tapes that wound up going to the White House. And it was various people working through and for the government that was trying to hush me up, trying to put this prophecy down to the point that I wasn't capable of speaking for the ministry. You keep in mind, whenever it talks about the Bible, and we're all equal at the foot of the cross. It doesn't matter who we are or where we come from or how much education or how much money that we have. Whenever it comes to being at the foot of the cross, we don't call God. God calls us. Do you agree with that?
No, I'm sure.
Because the Bible says that no man can be saved unless the Father draweth him. If the Father don't draw you through and by the Holy Spirit, you can't save yourself. And you can't save yourself by doing good deeds. I mean, people think that they can. They think, well, I can get out here and I can, devote my time and money over here in this area and devote my time and money over in this area. But the fact of the matter is, if you haven't never been born again, you still aren't saved. You can give everything in the world away. And you can spend all the time that you want to in the church building, but if you're not sincere towards receiving Christ into your life, then you haven't been saved. It's only been up until recently, and I want you to be open because my niece out in California is probably going to be my sole representative in how that my story gets promoted and told to the general public pertaining to her being my spokesman. She has taken that much sincerity and that much interest in my life. And even though she's out in California, and I did go and visit her whenever I was out west, pretty close to the Golden Gate Bridge, out there, pretty close to Lodi, California, Sacramento, California. That's where their capital is, Sacramento, California, up there in grape country. Matter of fact, I called her a while ago, and she wanted me to swing by here and talk to you and get some sort of input. She was on her way to go to work, working for a distillery that makes wine out of all those grapes. She will basically be my mouthpiece in how that my story gets told in the format that it gets told in. So if you don't mind, in a limited amount of words, could you please elaborate on our relationship?
Well, I just met you at church. I think
2005.
some of the kids was having a car wash, and you stopped and got a car wash, and they invited you to church.
And you recognized that I was disheartened because of the emotional stress that I just went through as far as going through a divorce.
So,
And you took interest in me.
I just tried to, talk to you and encourage you to help you get over, a divorce and moving to Nashville.
And then at one time, I'm sure you remember it because it seems like your mind's just as good as mine, or if it comes to your memory. At one time, we hooked up because my dad was in Martin Hospital. Do you remember that event that we drove all the way to Martin, Tennessee, and I showed you around the farmhouse and showed you where my brother and all live? But do you remember going into the hospital towards going to visit my dad?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
What exactly happened on that day?
Well, he acted like he was glad to see you and all to start with, and then he just got,
Real irritable.
yeah, rational, and, they finally told him once, he had to calm down, and he didn't do it, so they asked us to leave so they could give him, I assume, enough medicine to knock him out.
But he got all emotional, didn't he? He got all mad and all.
Oh yeah, he was just in a state of rage.
And that's one of the factors that I wanted to bring out was as my father got older, instead of him mellowing out towards me so that we could rebond, which most sons, most daughters want to bond with their parents, especially as their parents are getting older. That way they can have good fond memories of them.
Oh, sure.
And my father never would allow for that to materialize. A matter of fact, I was in Kansas City, Missouri, whenever I got the telephone call that he was basically on his deathbed, and it was my son and my ex-wife that witnessed his passing. They was at his deathbed. You're getting a telephone call.
Oh, yeah, let it ring.
Just let it ring. Could be somebody wanting to sell you something.
Probably.
You get a lot of marketers and a lot of people wanting to aggravate the you know what out of you towards give me this and sell me this and give me that and sell me that. And
Well, yesterday I got 3 calls. They kept saying they was from Social Security Board, that somebody had used my Social Security number in Texas.
in other words, it was fraudulent calls.
Why, yeah.
People trying to hound you and trying to get money out of you and stuff.
I
They
just-
target elderly people.
Oh,
These
yeah.
kind of people do. I was also going to ask you another question. Whenever I was out in Oklahoma and they nabbed me back up because of a telephone call up here in Land Between the Lakes. During almost a year's event, did you know that I was spending 9.5 months up in Kentucky, up in a jail?
No, I don't.
You didn't know about that event. Now, the event before that in 2010, whenever they wound up nabbing me up in Land Between the Lakes, and I spent almost 6 months in downtown Chicago being studied by Dr. Dana in MCC in downtown Chicago. I think you was aware of that event because that happened. I think I had just left your house. As a matter of fact, I know I did. I just left your house and went to Land Between the Lakes, which is give or take about a 2.5-hour drive. And within 15 minutes, I was arrested. And that's probably whenever those feds come in here and investigated your records or investigated your phone. Was whenever that second occurrence took place. I've had some people, Miss Bobbie Sue, that wanted to taint me. They wanted to. Are you familiar with character assassination?
Well, no, not really. I've heard of it, but I'm not.
Do you know what your character is? Your character is your reputation,
Oh, yeah.
who you really are. And if you have people that's against you because for whatever reason, bias, they're being biased, they will purposely try to disrupt your life in trying to paint you to the rest of the world like you're a monster. And the whole time, instead of me being the monster, it was the people that had a hold of the brush that was doing the painting. You keep in mind, I went through 3 major psychiatric studies simply because of me spending so much time up in Land Between the Lakes. And the last time, they reached all the way out to nab me up in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. You remember me calling you up and telling you that I'd rented out a 3-bedroom house? You remember that? Because I had a good job, I was making good money, and I'd got all that stuff in behind me in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I finally got all that stuff in behind me. They dropped all the charges. Remember me telling you that?
Oh, yes.
Well, that's whenever they nabbed me up that same year. I guess it was long about August, long about maybe October, nabbed me up and drove me all the way back to Kentucky over me contacting Land Between the Lakes on 2 different telephone calls. The first telephone call was to law enforcement, to their department. That was a non-threatening, in an apologetic form telephone call. And the second telephone call, I waited almost 90 days, almost 3 months. Then I contacted a Gary Hawkins up in that same department, Land Between the Lakes, that had something to do with the forestry division. And that's whenever they decided to put out a federal warrant for my arrest, because they was associated with a federal entity. At the time, Land Between the Lakes was a federal entity. It was a federal park. It was a national park. And because it was a federal entity, that gave them the authority to use federal jurisdiction authority. And that's whenever they put out a warrant for my arrest on a national level, not a state level, but a national level. And that's whenever they nabbed me up in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, in which my house that I'd rented out, I lost almost $2,000 in rent. I lost what furniture that I had in that house. I almost lost my truck, my trailer, my tools, and all my records if it wasn't for an individual by the name of Billy Rose, another body man that I was working with at the time, that I'd already sat down and explained to him what was going on in my life towards people trying to frame me. And he had enough sympathy that whenever they arrested me, that he loaded up all my stuff and took it to his house. He lived in somewhere outside of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, Chickasaw, the town of Chickasaw or something like that. Anyways, my truck and trailer with all my possessions stayed in behind his house from the time I got arrested, from the time that I decided to make bond, which was on the 12th month, the 12th day, 2012. 12, 12, 12. You remember 12, 12, 12? Whenever they thought that the Mayans and everybody else had predicted that the end of the world was going to happen. Of course, we've seen that now a couple different times. They thought the same thing during Y2K. Whenever all the calendars went to 2000. They didn't know if people's computers was going to reset themselves. And there was a lot of talk throughout the world that the world may come to an end because of Y2K, in which we know that Y2K wasn't nothing but a bunch of talk. We know that 12, 12, 12 wasn't nothing but a bunch of talk. But the day after 12, 12, 12, I made bond, which at the time was a $1,500 bond. I made bond and got on a Greyhound bus in Clarksville and went from Clarksville to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I had to go to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and then have Billy Rose come and pick me up and take me to his house so that I could get the very truck that you just got through looking at a while ago. Miss Bobbie Sue, I've been out a lot of time. I've been out a lot of money. I've been rolled through the mill on account of the feds trying to destroy my life. Have you never been curious enough to ask yourself, well, if the individual that I met in 2005 is a born-again Christian, he's not a bad guy, I trust his character, how come they're doing what they're doing to him? Have you never stopped and asked yourself that about me?
Oh, yeah.
They're trying to stop me being the founder of a ministry that God has called me into, which is the Windmill Ministries. And because of my authenticity of it being real, And because of the 9 tapes that wound up going to the White House, going all the way back to Ronald Reagan's administration, they have purposely, actively, intentionally tried to destroy the very person that's sitting in front of you right now. Now, you have to ask yourself the $64,000 question. Why has the United States government spent so much time in having me evaluated on 3 major evaluations? The first one was in 1991 in Wheeling, West Virginia. The second one, that was almost a 6-month study. The second one was downtown Chicago in MCC. And the third one was the very year that I'm talking to you about, that they went to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and picked me up and drug me back to Cadiz, Kentucky, just outside of Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and ordered for another psychiatric evaluation to be done up in LaGrange, Kentucky. So you have to ask yourself a question, and somebody's paying for all this. Me going in front of all these doctors, because like in 1991, whenever I went to Butler, North Carolina, the first major study that I done, Miss Bobbie Sue, it wasn't nothing uncommon for me to wake up and have to go in front of a panel of doctors, and sometimes there would be as many as 10, 12, 15 sitting at a table, everybody wearing white suits, asking me, Mr. Jackson, how are you doing today? How do you feel? Do you have any intentions towards wanting to harm somebody? Did you have any nightmares? Did you have a good bowel movement? Are you doing okay today? And that routinely, that type of questionnaire went on for almost a 6-month period on the first study. The second study was almost just as intense up in Chicago. And the third study was almost just as intense in LaGrange, Kentucky. So why has either state or federal government spent so much time in trying to categorize me, departmentalize me over into a category towards me being a whack, a loon, somebody out of his mind? I'm going to tell you why. It's the same type of adversity. It's the same type of resistance that happened during the time of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. If you remember reading the story, and I'm sure you do, you've read the Bible many times, there was a resistance movement that started in Jesus' life before he ever became a man. It was King Herod who had found out about the prophecy that was going to be fulfilling. And he found out that it was going to be fulfilling right there in his district, in his region. And he put out an order trying to stop the prophecy from occurring by ordering for every infant, from the way that I understand it, from about the age of 3 and under, to be killed. And they estimate probably about 5,000 little infants died simply because of an evil dictator that was trying to stop that particular prophecy from fulfilling itself. You remember reading about it?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there was actually a, what would you call it on Jesus' head? A price. There was already a price on Jesus' head from the time that he was just an infant, from the time that he just first come into an existence, towards somebody wanting to stop that prophecy of it fulfilling itself. Well, didn't basically the same thing happen in the era of the Pharaohs pertaining to Moses? You remember whenever Moses, they was doing something with the babies because they knew about something, that deliverer that was promised to come forth. And Moses' mother gave Moses up and sent him down this canal. And it was actually the Pharaoh's mother that found Moses and raised him up as an Egyptian. But the whole time, Moses was not an Egyptian. He was a Philistine, right?
I believe so.
He wasn't an Egyptian. And it wasn't until years later, whenever they identified who he was and that he wasn't true blood as far as his DNA, that's whenever they rebelled against Moses and basically throwed him out to the wolves and took him out into the desert, and that's where he was supposed to have died. But God took care of Moses, and he saved Moses, and he spoke to Moses, and he gave Moses a direct order of going back to the Pharaohs. Let my people go. And Moses was a deliverer for his people. But it took several times before Pharaoh's heart become softened after one example, after another example, after another example happened. The point that I'm trying to make is this. They claim history has a way of repeating itself. Okay? We can see what happened with Noah. Noah was instructed by God to build a boat. Noah was instructed to save his people. And of course, according to the Bible, the only people that he saved was his immediate family. I think was give or take about 8. God spoke or laid his hand or anointed Moses. And we see where that revolution went all the way around in full circle. We also see where other prophets of God was chosen by God to come forth with a message. Some of them never achieved any converts. Some of them was ridiculed. Some of them was put to death. Just like Jesus, the main leader. He was put to death as well as his disciples. I have had a similar anointing that has been placed up onto my head for me to do a certain particular task for God. And that is the reason why, Miss Bobbie Sue, that I have been through HELL pertaining to all these different state and government administrations that has tried to come up and bury me or destroy me. I think you're smart enough to know that you can bring harm and hurt to an individual's life and never physically touch them. Never physically touch them. You can ruin their character. You can ruin their reputation. You can drive that person off into a state of suicide. You can drive that person off into a state of insanity. There's all kinds of ways that you can bring harm and hurt to an individual and never touch them. Physically never touch them as far as trying to kill them. Physically trying to kill them either with a gun or a knife or something like that. And that's what they have tried to do with me. It hasn't been until just recently, because of the very piece of device that I'm holding in my hand right now, that I'm recording this conversation on, that I have managed to get my story out to the general public so that they can understand what that I have been through and the purpose for me going through it. Now, right now, I'm on my way to Bell Buckle, Tennessee, to hopefully enjoy myself this weekend pertaining to, the way that I understand it, is probably one of the second largest Tennessee events in the state of Tennessee, other than Tennessee Homecoming. I think last year it pulled in right at 250,000 people up there at Bell Buckle. It's a major event, especially with the weather going to be like it is now. But I just wanted to touch base with you on, because I know that you've had to have asked yourself in your quiet solitude, you've had to ask yourself, what was that all about? God, why did you allow for me to become acquainted with this individual that went through so much hardship, either hardship up in Kentucky or hardship in Tennessee, because you actually went to the mental institution in 2005 whenever I was up here working for Price's. Remember me working for Price's Body Shop? And then I went from Price's Body Shop to the dealership down here by Antioch. What was the name of that dealership? Was it Bill? Oh, not Bill Luke. Chevrolet dealership. I don't forget the name of it now. I'd have to look at my records to be sure. But anyways, you was living here during that time whenever Secret Service nabbed me up here in Nashville, Tennessee, and put me. What hospital was it that they put me in? Because you went and visited me, remember?
Yeah, I don't know.
It was the hospital east of Nashville, wasn't it? Over there where that big lake is?
It was, past Donaldson out there, but I don't know the name of the hospital offhand.
It was a mental institution, wasn't it? They had me in there for 4 days for an evaluation. Secret Service done that. Remember you bringing me a Tennessee hat? You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
All right, the chain of events from then on has, or should have been, signs that something was going on in this individual's life, talking about myself, of how come these high-ranking officials, such as Homeland Security, U.S. Marshals, CIA agents, TVA agents, how come so much heat is surrounding this individual's life? You remember whenever they nabbed me up in Knoxville, whenever I was working in Knoxville, up there by the airport, and they brought me to Davidson County, up here at the county jail, because some priest had filled out a warrant because I was leaving some material at all these churches around up here in Nashville, and you're guaranteed a quick resortment of if they have nabbed you up for whatever reason. But the first time that they scheduled court, the priest never showed up. The rabbi never showed up. And the second time, the rabbi never showed up. They had to let me go. But in them letting me go, they told me, Mr. Jackson, we're not going to take these charges and just throw them away as if they never occurred. Because by that time, I'd already been out to Oklahoma in 2009, and I had the heat right here in Nashville, Tennessee, that was all over me pertaining to the authorities. And they said, what we're going to do, we're going to take this charge and we're going to put it on a shelf. And if you so much as bat an eye for 11 months and 29 days, you're basically going to be on probation, which was an illegal act, because it was basically dismissed. The guy never showed up pertaining to whatever kind of, I think it was trespassing charge, I ain't for sure. But the rabbi never showed up. But they said, if you so much as even get caught jaywalking, we're going to take the charge that you get charged with, plus the charge that we have put on this shelf, and we're going to combine both of them together. In other words, there was people right here in Nashville that at that time was wanting to bury me. And the reason why that they was wanting to bury me, you keep in mind, whenever I went out to Oklahoma and discovered the truth about there being a cover-up pertaining to the Oklahoma bombing, the governor of the state of Tennessee banded me, and I don't know for sure if you're aware of this or not, banded me from all state and federal buildings for about 6 months to a year. Was you aware of that?
No, I don't recall it offhand.
Well, they did. It was an open ban that you can look it up on public record, on open domain, pertaining to Tennessee records, Tennessee files. And you'll see where the governor at the time put out a ban towards banning me from all federal and state facilities. That's pretty serious. That's serious stuff whenever you have high-ranking officials like that that's wanting to shun you, put you into a category of you either being crazy or harmful. And the whole time, Miss Bobbie Sue, I've never harmed or hurt nobody. As many times as I've been incarcerated, in as many pickles that I've been in pertaining to the authorities, I have yet to get in the first fight. I have yet to swing the first lick. I have yet to hurt the first individual. But they have tried and tried and tried to provoke me into that type of atmosphere. A matter of fact, I think I told you that just as recently as the past 2.5 years, in 2017, I lost my brother, my youngest brother. So now basically I have absolutely no one that is closely kin to me that I'm either living around or living on the same property with. My son, he's leery of me because he knows the truth about my life towards how that they have purposely picked on me and bullied me. But I have literally went through HELL since I have moved back to Tennessee in Weakley County since 2014 that has been a contributor to this right here towards overweight, especially whenever the ordeal happened to me up in Kentucky, whenever Judge Woodall, working through Trigg County, Kentucky, put me on Risperdal, a drug called Risperdal, and Risperdal is well known of causing obesity. That's what this is called right here, obesity, and breast enhancement. They put me on that drug. The people in Kentucky. I've had people, Miss Bobbie Sue, that wanted to destroy me. They wanted to kill me. And the same spirit, and I'm not saying that I'm Jesus, I'm not saying that I'm Noah, I'm not saying that I'm Moses, but the same Antichrist spirit that was after those men and women back years ago is the same Antichrist spirit that has tried to destroy my life. I had to come back here and tell you that. God has led me towards me coming back here and saying, Miss Bobbie Sue, this is the gospel. This is the truth. This is what occurred and why it occurred. Because I know that there were so many times that you had so much uncertainty about what was going on in my life because there was so much going on. You was beginning to wonder, my God, is this person really saved? Is this person a wolf in sheep's clothing? Is this person out to harm and hurt people? How come all these law enforcement agencies continue to keep hounding this guy? There was times, Miss Bobbie Sue, that you was actually willing to forfeit our relationship because of all the uncertainty. And I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all, because if it would have been me and I would have been your age and I would have been a female, I'd have been like you. I'd have been thinking, you know what, there's something up to this guy because it seems like he gets in trouble with the law all the time. I don't blame you because of you having uncertain feelings about me. But I wanted to come back and clarify, because we don't never know how long we're going to be in this world. I know not what tomorrow holds, but I know who holds tomorrow. I just wanted to come back and speak heart to heart with you pertaining to this, because it's been dragging, pulling on my heart towards me coming back and saying, Miss Bobbie Sue, I wouldn't hurt you for $1 million. And if you think for 1 second that I have tried to drag you into something illegitimate or something bad, you have been misled by those evil demonic forces that was trying to destroy me. And I think there was a certain part of you that knew this, but there was also a certain part of you that, out of you being cautious of taking care of yourself, you become leery of our friendship. And I just wanted to come and tell you that I don't blame you. If I would have been you and the shoe would have been on the other foot, I'd have been leery of me too. I would have been leery of me too. We never know what life is going to throw at us. We never know what we're going to have to face from one day to another. And I truly believe that I truly believe that it was appointed for you and I to have met one another the way that we met one another in 2005. Because you really, really helped me through a very, very dark, deep, emotional time in my life. After Miss Jackson walking out of my life and everything basically falling apart, pertaining to me losing that 5-acre mini farm up there in Lexington. And then I almost got arrested there in Weakley County whenever the authorities was trying to accuse me of falsifying files, which basically means somebody starting a ruckus, or somebody in a theater that pulls a fire alarm and hollers, fire, 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 that creates some sort of a panic, and a lot of people get hurt. The thing about it is, Miss Bobbie Sue, I wasn't never in a theater whenever that occurrence took place. I didn't pull a fire alarm. And guess what? The prophecy that I made about myself towards me going to be on the 6 o'clock news did in fact come true whenever I went out to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and I wound up on their state news, in their state council. So that prediction that I had made previous in 2005 did in fact come true in 2009. Which now puts us presently where we are today, in the year 2019.
Well, we just have to take one day at a time. None of us know what tomorrow brings.
Well, I think you can verify that if the hand of God wasn't on me, as many events that has happened in my life just since you've known me in the past 14 years, that if the hand of God wasn't on me, Miss Bobbie Sue, something bad would have already occurred.
Probably.
I'd have either gotten beat up real bad or killed in jail, or I'd have got life without parole, or something horrible would have done already occurred in my life. So it's pretty obvious that God is still taking care of Dennis.
Well, sure he is.
God is still protecting Dennis, just like God is still protecting Bobbie Sue. Because believe it or not, even though 14 years has passed, and all that water has run under that bridge, we're still back to me and you, one-on-one, towards one friend versus another friend that's a born-again Christian in Christ that makes us brothers and sisters in the Lord. And I know that you was cautious about that. And I don't blame you for being cautious about that. But you are part of my witness. One day, whenever I wind up going up into glory, in which Hopefully that's where both of us will go. I have no doubt that that's where you're going to go, and I have no doubt that that's where I'm going to go. But you're going to be a witness to some of the facts that occurred in my life, and I wanted to get it documented. That way, not only are you going to be a witness in the heavenly kingdom pertaining to the facts, but you can also be a witness in this lifetime towards some of the facts. Do you agree of what the things that we have discussed is in fact factual, truthful?
Oh, yes.
And no one is making you sit down and do this interview with me. And like I said, my niece, if I don't get to fulfill my calling that God has anointed me with, she has promised me that she will be one of the ones that will pick up the pieces and put it in a book or a title form. That way, the true truth can come out about Dennis. It's kind of like the song, and I'm sure you remember the song and the history of the song, it is well with my soul. It is well, it is well, it is well with my soul. Have you ever heard the history and behind how the song got in existence to begin with?
No, I don't believe so.
It's similar to the Titanic. It was a boat accident that occurred way out in the ocean. It was in the early 1800s where this banker, I believe he was a banker, was fixing to take a trip to England and not already paid for the trip and everything. He had some money, and his wife and his daughter was scheduled to go with him. He had 2 daughters. I think it was 2 daughters. Anyways, it was his family. They was going to do a family outing towards going all the way to England. And there at the last, just about the time they was getting ready to board the ship, he got a telegram that he had to go back, I think it was in Pennsylvania, to take care of some business. Well, he told his wife and his family, y'all go ahead and I'll get on the next boat trip over to England. On the way to England, the boat hit an iceberg, similar towards what happened with the Titanic, and it sunk to the bottom, and everybody on the ship died. I don't think the boat was near as big as the Titanic. You know, the Titanic had a lot of people, and I think, what was it, 1,500 people on the Titanic, or 1,800 people, or something like that. Titanic was a big boat at that time, during that time, the Titanic. But on the next trip to England, after he had found out that the boat went down and everybody had died, there was no survivors. On the next boat trip to England, the captain of the ship stopped the boat about in the same place where the original ship went down, and was talking to all the people on the boat. Well, this is about where the ship went down at, and there was so many people here, and there was no survivors, and it made history of it. Well, the guy that was the banker walked from the bow back into his sleeping quarters, and he wrote a ledger. And in his ledger, he wrote, "It is well with my soul." And it wasn't until 2 generations later, he got remarried, he had more children, their children had children. So it would have been his granddaughter that found that ledger and turned that ledger into a song. And today we know the song as "It Is Well with My Soul." So the things that we do today, Miss Bobbie Sue, you may not think are important, or you may not think are being looked at, analyzed, dissected. You may not think that they're being recorded towards influencing other people's lives in generations down below us. But the seeds that we plant today are the harvest of tomorrow. And I don't think it was an accident that you and me met in 2005, whenever I was going through one of my deepest, darkest moments in my particular life. And I just wanted to come back and reconfirm with you that I hold absolutely no malice, no remorse or hardship towards what has went on during those 14 and 15 years, that our friendship has been sometimes on the rocks. I'm going to use those type of words to illustrate our relationship, because there was times because of so much controversy going on in my life, you had to wonder, my God, what's really going on with this individual's life? Is this a good person? Is this a bad person? Have I got associated with a person that's a wolf in sheep's clothing? Or what's really happening here with this guy? I know that there's been uncertainty, and I know that you've questioned yourself and you've questioned God about that. And to help to clear up the air, to help to bury the hatchet, per se, I thought it would be advisable if I come back and documented this. That way my niece, one day whenever she gets a hold of this material, she can put it in her ledger, and you don't never know whether or not it's going to be turned into a book or a movie or a song. You remember one of the main interests that I had whenever I first had an encounter with you was that my concern was that I wanted to make a book of my life. And that was 14 years ago that I knew that I had the material for a book. Now, can you imagine from 14 years ago then versus the material that I have now, that I can compile that same testimony from that same person to add to that book? It's Bobbie Sue, I've been on national news. I'm known by hundreds of millions of people all over the world towards being a whistleblower, towards identifying what happened out there in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, towards it being a major cover-up that was related to what went on in Waco, Texas. I have really went out on a limb towards putting my life out there, not knowing if I was going to be slandered, not knowing if I was going to go to jail, not knowing if somebody was going to misinterpret what I was doing, what my intentions was. I really put myself out there on a limb, because I knowed what went on in 1988, going all the way back to Ronald Reagan's administration, pertaining to 9 tapes that I can physically prove. I've got the documentation, the certified mail, to prove that those 9 tapes went to Ronald Reagan's administration that helped to end the Cold War in Russia, pertaining to the falling of the Berlin Wall. I've got documentation of this. I'm not just blowing smoke. There was a reason that they was hounding me. There was a reason that they was attacking me. Now you know. It's the same reason why they was trying to destroy Jesus Christ, that they didn't want him to fulfill his calling neither. They didn't want Moses to fulfill his calling. And I bet you, if the truth be known, they didn't keep records like they do today, but I bet you, if the truth be known, they probably done the exact same thing to Noah. They probably tried to take his life too as well. I know it's documented that they tried to make him out like he was a madman, like he was crazy. I do know that. And to go through that type of human suffering, and to go through that type of relentless, cruel, and inhumane psychological torment, it's hard on you. It's hard on you not knowing from one day to another whether or not they're going to come in and drag you out of your house for no reason, or whether or not they're going to falsify records and falsely accuse you of this or falsely accuse you of that. You know, they asked Billy Graham, I'm fixing to end, unless you want to do a rebuttal here and say something that you want to make a comment on. But they asked Billy Graham before he died, whenever he was elderly, you know, way up in years. They asked him, said, what do you deem your successes off of? And of course, the first and the foremost thing was God, the Holy Spirit. And you know what the second thing was, Miss Bobbie Sue? You know what the second comment was?
No.
Cautiousness. He said, God showed me in the young part of this ministry towards being cautious. In other words, don't never trust nobody in giving people the benefit of the doubt until you really get to know them. He said, but every time that I would interview somebody, I would always leave the door open, or I'd have a camera going, or a tape player going. That way, if somebody wanted to falsely accuse me and say that I was trying to pull the wool over somebody's eyes, or I was trying to get fresh with a female towards hanky-panky, that I had proof that I was not engaged in that type of activity. He knew, Billy Graham knew, that he was going to become a target at a young age in the ministry. And because of it, he was cautious. And he said that that was part of the success of the Billy Graham ministries today. In other words, you can't be too cautious whenever you're dealing with people, because people will stab you in the back, people will lie to you, people will hoodoo you, people will hurt you. And like I told you a while ago, there's thousands of ways that you can hurt an individual and never physically touch them. Never physically touch them. And I never wanted to impose any type of uncomfortness or harm or hurt into your life in any form or fashion. And I hope to God that you believe that.
Oh yes, I believe that. Yes.
Well, it's 2:37, and if I'm going to make it to Bell Buckle and get settled in by this evening, I need to go on down there and go ahead and leave.
Yeah, because 3 o'clock the traffic starts really getting worse. People getting off from work.
Right. So I need to go ahead and get on out of here. I want to go in prayer, if you don't mind, to end this interview with you, because it's been touching to me pertaining to all this. And I know that you didn't have to allow for me to come in this house, and you didn't have to allow for me to use my documentation device to document this. Father, righteous God, I realize and have realized for quite some times that you have called us into a battleground. Not a playground, but a battleground. And I knew that during the times that I was associated with my friend's life here, Miss Bobbie Sue, that it was only the snares and the attacks coming from the enemy, from within, Satan, the one that your son openly brought transparency to, that is out to kill, steal, and destroy, pertaining to the author of confusion, pertaining to Lucifer, Satan. I just pray, O Lord, from this moment on, that Miss Bobbie Sue will be touched, that you will continue to be with her. Give her a sound mind. Help her, O Lord, in her health. Give her the stability that she needs to protect her. And that all things do work in the glory of you, for you and by you. I just pray, God, that you will continue to keep us in your hollow hand, because without you, we're nothing. We can do nothing. We can do nothing. I just ask all these things in Jesus' name. And amen. It's been a long road, Miss Bobbie Sue. 14 years. It has really been a long road. And I know that you wish me well towards my story being told. That way people will know the truth about what has occurred here. It's all based around accountability. And I have learned that the courts here in America is no longer working under the pretense towards do as I do. But the courts is working under the pretense towards do as I say and not as I do, which is hypocritical. That's the reason why the system has been turned upside down. And that's the reason why that we're seeing so much corruption in all these different departments of government, regardless whether it's federal, state, or local. And that's the reason why we're $23 trillion in debt and over 2.3 million incarcerated prisoners, either in local, state, or in federal jails. There's more people incarcerated in America than any other part of the world, in any other country. That should speak volumes to the educated and those that are aware of what's going on pertaining to the corruption of the government. Just like them taking $650 from me whenever I moved back to Weakley County while my brother was still living. And the only reason why that my brother and I was even concerned about what was going on across the road was because there was 3 children over there. One of them no older than probably a year, and the oldest one may have been 7, 8, little boy. But we seen things going on in that home across from my house that was not appropriate for children to be exposed to. Because the Weakley County authorities are so corrupt, the judicial system, they flipped it and turned it around to the point that they put a felony on my life for trying to help a woman with 3 children. And I spent 37 days in jail during the time that my brother died. Within 10 days after my brother died, I was spending time in the Weakley County Jail because of stalking. Claimed that I was stalking this family across from me. How can you be stalking somebody, first of all, across from you, if you live there? Secondly, it'd have been different if there wasn't a reason for both of us, my brother and I, both of us. We had done already called the Child Abuse Center here in Nashville, and done called the Child Abuse Center in Weakley County. Couldn't get nothing done. The court systems, the systems that's supposed to be working fundamentally, wasn't working at that time. And the only way that the court system could figure out how to stop it was to attack me. I've never seen this country so turned upside down. And I think you can verify that for yourself, can't you?
Oh, yeah.
It's awful. And it's simply because people have walked away with the trueness of their convictions with God. Well, let me get on out of here. That way I can maybe beat the traffic.
Now, yeah, 440, they got, some of that all tore up and down to one lane, so I don't know which way, it'd be best for you to.
I'll Google it. It'll tell me. I already know I'll probably have to stop and go and stop and go. Well, get up and give me a hug. You still looking good.
No, I don't feel so good most of the time, but I'm still getting around. So.
You said you had some back injury problem. Did you get
Yeah.
that straightened out, or did it still bother you?
It's arthritis, so I mean.
You can really tell it whenever the winter time comes, can't you?
I know.
That cold weather hurts, don't it?
Yeah, and it's scattered all through the back, so there's not much they can do.
Sure. Mine's in my lower back.
Well, that's where mine. And then I'm getting rheumatoid in
In your hand, swelling up and stuff.
But
Well, I'm on diabetes now.
well, I am.
I mean, shots. I'm having to give myself shots now.
Well,
Yeah.
I take a diabetes pill every day, but
Well, I do that and a shot
well,
because of this weight.
I started to say, Dennis, but try your best.
I have. I've tried, and it's a lot easier said than done. You can put it on, but you can't get it off.
Seemed to me like you may have gained, lost a little bit since you was here before. I don't know.
I think I have. I've started going to the Y a little bit.
Yeah,
I've started exercising more,
yeah.
but yeah, it's been a tough go for me.
And sugar now, you shouldn't be eating sugar much on account of your diabetes.
Right. But if they're giving me 70-30, high and low, and I'm supposed to give myself a shot an hour before I eat a meal. And the doctor that I'm seeing down at Dyersburg, it's had a positive influence on my sugar diabetes.
Well, that's
Yep. Well, let me get on.
okay.
And I don't want to film nothing in your house, because in this day and time,